Coming up next on the Filthy Rich Cleaners podcast.
Just remember, there will never be a day you do not have a problem in your business. There'll never be a day. You may have a calm day, but it doesn't mean there's not a problem brewing on the horizon.
From your first dollar to your first million, welcome to the Filthy Rich Cleaners podcast, presented by ZenMade. Join your host, Stephanie Pipkin, founder of Serene Clean, as she shares proven tips, tricks, and hard-earned lessons. Whether you're just starting out or ready to scale, get ready to discover how to build your own cleaning empire. Let's roll up our sleeves and dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Filthy Rich Cleaners podcast. I am your host, Stephanie from Serene Clean. And in today's solo episode, I want to give you guys a little analogy that I have been thinking about recently. And it basically revolves around the fact that our problems in our cleaning business can typically be broken down into three categories, right? And those three categories are going to be supply, demand, and operations, right? All problems that we experience within our business are going to be falling within one of those categories. Supply being staffing for us. That is our good, if you will. If we were, selling something, which we are, we're a service-based business. So we are selling literal physical labor, right? Demand is going to be on the customer and sales side, and then operations, which is just literally everything else, how the business operates. And that could be in a million different flavors of problems related to that specific topic. But truly, I think we can all break down all of our problems into one of those three buckets. And something I've been thinking about is how we kind of play like problem whack-a-mole in our businesses. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever played whack-a-mole and they like pop out of the holes and you hit it and then another one pops up and then you hit that and then they just keep popping up and you're like, where are all these moles coming from, right? And the moles are our problems. And point being is it is, I think, a fruitless endeavor to aim for a problem-free business. And truly at every level of business that I have experienced, and I know that every new level of business that I experience, there's going to be new problems to solve. And there's always going to be certain problems that are the same problem, just in different flavors, right? That could be staffing. That could be getting enough sales and leads. And then from an operations standpoint, it could be a scheduling thing or what have you. There's always going to be problems that we are attempting to solve. And I think that we can save ourselves a lot of frustration and I think a lot of shaming that we probably do on ourselves if we stop trying to have a problem-free business. I think our goal rather should be, how can we mitigate the problems, erase the environment that problem can even exist in, or minimize the impact that the problem is having in your business, right? So something that we always say at Serene Clean, not always, but it's something that you may have heard, I believe Katie and Katie's interview with me, who is my customer relations manager. We kind of talked about this, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, but it's something that a concept that we bring up time and time again as Serene Clean continues to grow. And that is, if we had 50 employees right now, what would break? Meaning if we jumped from where we are now to 50 staff members, what in the business is going to break? And that tells us that that area is not prepared to scale correctly, right? Or there needs to be improvements or adjustments made. And this thought experiment is incredibly useful because it gives you clarity of the big problem, right? And you may say, Stephanie, if I scale to 50, everything would break, like nothing is ready. And keep in mind that the number is kind of irrelevant. What I want you to do with this concept is to pick a perhaps challenging number for you, maybe something slightly out of reach. Or you, on the flip side, you could say, if I added one more staff member or I added my first staff member, what is going to break? Because we're all at different levels and places in our business ownership journey, right? You guys might be listening and not have any staff members. You might be a solo cleaner right now and you are thinking about taking the leap. I know a lot of you guys are because I talk to you. And so I want you to really ask yourself, what's going to break if I take that next step? What's going to break if I attempt to grow in that way? Because I think a lot of us, we get impatient. We want very quick growth because we're like, oh, that is the goal, right? To grow our business. But we do not have the systems in place to make that growth actually be something that we can sustain and not everything fall apart. So all of this being said is those three areas that describe supply, demand, and operations. Those are the areas that we can look at that are going to break when we ask ourselves this question of, if I added this amount of staff members, what's going to break, right? And so I really want you guys to be thinking about that of, okay, this is what's going to be the problem. This is what's going to be the problem. And that helps us get a little bit more clarity on the things that we need to focus on, right? And so for us in Serene Clean last year, when we were asking ourselves this problem, it was training. Training was what was going to break. That's an operations thing, right? That's not supply. That's not demand. That is operations. Sorry, I am distracted. I got a new kitty, you guys. Her name is Jenny. I brought her home on Monday. This is my new baby. If you're listening, you can't see her. But look at her little bobtail. She's so cute. Anyway, so she is quite vocal. So if you guys can hear a bunch of meowing in the background, that's why. Thanks for the distraction, Jenny. Okay, so for us, it was last year, the big problem was going to be in the operations side of it. And what I want to caution you guys about when it comes to like thinking about this is it's not like that's your only problem, right? We probably all have problems in these three categories that certain parts of it would break or fall apart if we added that growth stage. But the point being is like, what is the big problem? What is the most painful thing? Because I think we just all have to come to terms with the fact that we are going to have problems at all stages of business for the entirety of the business. No matter how big you grow, no matter what, there are problems to be solved. So I guess I want to encourage you guys to not beat yourself up if you have problems. And I also don't want you to get into analysis paralysis. And what kind of prompted this topic, honestly, was a consulting call that I had with one of you on Tuesday. And you are just about to hire a staff member and you're kind of in that stuck, I want everything to be perfect before I bring on a staff member. And that is one, there's positives to that because it means that you are thinking about this concept, right? You're thinking, what's going to break if I bring this new staff member on? So that's a wonderful thing, but we don't want to get stuck in there and we don't want to make the problem bigger than what it needs to be, because that particular lady was very concerned about like the legalities of hiring W-2 and making sure she does everything right, like with the state. And she was getting really, really overwhelmed with like this process of like, how do I set everything up operationally to correctly bring on somebody, right? And then just getting overwhelmed and then freezing and not wanting to hire because of that. And I know many of you have experienced that or are currently experiencing that kind of like, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just not going to do it. And I'm going to keep rolling how I am, which is being, an individual cleaner. Well, not individual, but you're a business, but you don't have any staff members, right? And so unfortunately, that's not sustainable if that's what you don't want to do. You want to be getting out of the field, right? So point being, it is good to have this lens. Obviously, this is what I'm suggesting, but then we need to take action towards that thing. And action may simply be going to ChatGPT and saying, I am in this state and I am stuck on how to do this correctly. These are the softwares I currently use. What do I need to do in order to go from where I am now to having a W-2 employee, right? What do I need to do from a legality standpoint, from the state licensing and all of that kind of stuff? Because it's really not as complicated as I think we make it out to be. Truly, nothing in business field is like as complicated as we make it out to be. So I want you guys to do this thought experiment, but then I don't want you to get stuck because you are terrified of making the wrong move. And you have heard me say time and again on this podcast how we want to take action, right? We need to do something, but we need to also not be so shooting from the hip, which has definitely been one of my weaknesses as strengths as a business owner, as I've described before, is that like I'm very like bias towards action, which I do think is a wonderful trait. We can't get too paralyzed, but the problem is we do need to think about things thoroughly at the same time when we have the ability to. We need to think about the problems, but we can't think too long that it paralyzes us. We need to just try. And the more that we can try and fail and then adjust and just keep going, and you're going to improve faster, right? Why do we feel bad about ourselves or that we are a failure because we have problems when every single other owner of a cleaning business is experiencing either the same problems or has experienced the same problems or will experience the same problems? Why are we feeling bad about that? That is not any type of indicator of us being successful, us being intelligent, us being good, any of these things, us being hardworking. It doesn't mean we're not any of those things. It just means that this is the reality of owning a cleaning business. And so I really just don't want you guys to get stuck in why is this happening to me, or this keeps happening to me. We need to completely take any judgment out of it and just say, okay, this problem is a supply problem. Okay, the supply meaning staff members. We are having a staff member supply problem. So what can we do to solve it? And going into problem solving mode. Or this is a sales problem. This is a demand problem. What is it about it? And then getting more nuance, right? So I really want you guys to think about the current problems that you're facing, put them in these buckets. And you literally, I would suggest writing it down. You may have a shit ton of problems. I mean, I certainly do, just in general as a person, but you could put them in these buckets. And then once we have them kind of sorted, then we can break them down further, right? And it just makes you feel like things aren't all chaotic and in the air and in the ether of, oh my gosh, I have all these problems. It's okay, no, actually the biggest problem is a demand problem, right? And you may know that because you're I don't have enough customers, because the end result of that particular problem, meaning not enough demand, is you have cleaners with openings in their schedule, or you have cleaners quitting because they don't have enough hours, right? That is the symptom of the root cause of you don't have consistent demand or leads, right? And so now we're talking sales and marketing, and we can kind of start delving into why is this happening and understanding the problem fully. And that it does help sometimes to have, another set of eyes come in and say here, because, for example, myself, I can tell most people why something is not working. But I find that just getting these problems down on paper and out of our brain really helps. And, or, again, if it's an operations problem, what specifically is not working? And so the first thing I want you guys to do is really think about, if I was to add X amount of business, why would fail? Why being the problem area, right? So what would that be? And maybe it's everything would fail, including your mental health, including your sanity, maybe all of it. But if that right there, I was kind of joking, but not really. Because if your sanity is going to fail, that means that's an operations problem, right? There is something that needs to go. And so a lot of times when it's that particular thing, it is either a time management or delegation, or even questioning the entire process of what you're doing completely, right? So you guys know how I feel about doing in-person walkthroughs, right? And I know a lot of you are experimenting with not doing in-person walkthroughs, which I'm really proud of you for. And because what could be happening if I say, hey, if you add 3 cleaners, what's going to break? And you're going to say me. I'm going to break because I don't have time for all of this. I don't have time to bring on them. I don't have time to train or quality control or all of these things. Well, how are you spending your time? Let's say you're out of the field, or you're partially out of the field. You're not cleaning that much. Okay, what is going to break? Well, if it's your time, if you're doing in-person walkthroughs, how many hours a week is that, right? That maybe we could completely eradicate that. If you're still sending out appointment reminders manually, meaning you're texting or emailing those manually, that's something that could be completely automated with a scheduling software like ZenMaid, perhaps. That could be automated. So there's things that we could take off of you completely from an automation standpoint that starts to open it up, starts to give you that sigh of relief. Or, as I spoke about in last week's episode, we could start delegating. So a lot of times if it's you that's going to break, what specifically are you doing and spending time on? Training. If you have a few cleaners already, is there a cleaner that is really great that they could actually take on most of the training if they would be open to it, right? For me, I hate training. That's one of the first things that I did not want to be doing anymore. I'm not a great trainer. I'm not particularly patient. And I just am like, I know how to do this. Why don't you know how to do this? And that's a terrible mindset, right? That's a bad teacher mindset. So, and it's funny because like I can teach you guys things and I'm super patient, but there's something about like physically cleaning that I'm like, it's so obvious, right? But it's not obvious. So terrible mindset. You don't want me as your trainer. But point being, if you think that you are going to be the bottleneck, meaning your time, your energy, if you were to add 2 cleaners, 3 cleaners, whatever that looks like, well, then how are you spending your time, and could we open up some bandwidth for you? And it doesn't mean obviously that that's about to happen, but the point is it makes you start to think of like, what is it that needs to change? Because if we couldn't have 3 cleaners, something isn't right here. Right? If we can't have 10 cleaners or wherever you are, right? Like add a couple cleaners to where you are now. What is going to break? Okay, if that's the problem, or what's going to cause the most pain, perhaps, maybe not breaking, but it's like, well, our quality is going to be really shitty because we don't have training and we're already having a decent amount of quality issues at the size that we're having. So if we add more cleaners, that problem is just going to grow. And that's kind of like, as the Serene Clean management team, those are the discussions we're going to have, or that we have on a regular basis is, okay, if we added 5 cleaners, what problem are we about to grow? Because that tells us what we're avoiding. It becomes crystal clear as to exactly the area that we are not like focusing on enough, or we need to fix the problem. So when we fixed our training, when we fixed our quality control, and that literally meant adding Hannah as our lead trainer and quality controller. So it may mean another person, right? And that's not, again, something that maybe you can afford to do right now, but could you prepare something in the means of having your standard operating procedures, or trying to make it so that when you are able to afford to pass this thing off, it is a lot easier to delegate, just like we talked about last week. Like a lot of us are not prepared to grow because we do not have the systems in place to actually hand off to a VA, to a manager, to somebody else, right? So if that's the problem, if that, again, coming back to operations of like, that's going to be the limiting factor for you, is actually being able to successfully teach somebody how to do this thing, right? So point being, I know I'm talking about a couple different concepts, but the whole idea is to remember we're all going to have problems. We are all going to have similar problems, honestly, and that's why it's so wonderful to have like the Zen Made Mastermind. We can bounce ideas off and things like that. But if we can name what area the problem is in and what exactly about the problem that is going to cause issues if you were to grow, that makes it a lot easier and more specific for you to solve that problem, right? Like I can't add 2 cleaners because I do not consistently get leads, or all of my leads are coming from word of mouth, and that is incredibly inconsistent, and I don't know when that's happening, right? So how could we systematize our lead management, or or I should say lead procurement, right? Like how can I increase so we have consistent leads? Or it could be sales operations, I should say, and like follow up. I get lots of leads. Like I've talked to several of you, you're getting lots of leads, but none of them are closing. Okay, this is an actual like sales process problem, right? And so we can kind of delve into exactly where the problem is. So it's all about asking yourself the right questions, I think, and that allows you to get a lot more clarity around it. And as I always quote Layla Hermosi of, fear is an inch deep and a mile wide. So what that means in this particular scenario is saying like, I am so overwhelmed, but once we start labeling it, we realize exactly what the problem is. And that gives you that clarity. That's why tracking is so important, as I've talked about, because it allows you to understand and have clarity about what the actual problem is. So all of that to say, I just do not want you guys to be getting overwhelmed by all of the problems in your business. The goal is, coming back to our whack-a-mole analogy, is how can we all the holes, like how can we fill some of the holes with sand so they simply can't come out of those holes? So other example, one of the holes that we fill is we don't allow for team cleaning as much as possible so that I have less drama to deal with, because once you start putting cleaners together, you introduce potential for more drama. So I just completely eradicate that hole on the game by not having that as much as possible. So mitigating problems before they even arise. And so for a lot of you, that could be another example, getting client guidelines in place, right? We are avoiding problems, client guidelines that are signed. We are avoiding problems before they even come up because we expect them. And that's what this is about, is we are expecting problems to happen, and we are trying to, instead of it just being like a giant like mountain, it's just a little speed bump in the road because we were expecting this. I knew that this was going to happen. Same with call outs, right? I expect call outs to happen every single week, right? 2 weeks ago, I think I had like, what was it? What did we have? Like 100 hours of unexpected absences or something like that. And actually it was shocking. We didn't have to cancel on anybody like that. I don't know. I got wizards in my office that was able to happen. So we know that call outs are going to happen. We know that that's going to happen. So this problem that is a regular problem that will always happen, that means we can start planning for it. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this keeps happening. Well, of course it keeps happening because that's like the nature of the business. So it is a problem for sure, and I'm never going to eradicate that problem. So then I need to mitigate the effects of the problem. That's what I'm aiming for, is how can we blunt and soften the effects? So it's not like this, it's more like bloop. This is it. This is just standard day in the life of Serene Clean, right? So that's really what we're aiming for. So sometimes you can eradicate the problem, and then a new problem pops up, and then you hit that, and then another one pops up and you hit that. And sometimes you can just get rid of the problem altogether, whether that be in a process or a procedure, some type of policy that you need to put in place that either your clients or your employees are signing. So there are ways to solve those problems. That's what a lot of things I focus on this podcast, is how do we solve those problems? But just remember, there will never be a day you do not have a problem in your business. There'll never be a day. And you may have a calm day, but it doesn't mean there's not a problem brewing on the horizon. And it just is what it is. And I just want you guys to accept that. I don't want you to be stressed out. That is literally what we have signed up for as being business owners. And I remember I believe Cheryl's episode a long time ago, she kind of commented of like, that's our job as the CEOs and the owners, is like, we're chief problem solvers, right? Like that is literally what we signed up for, is to solve the problems. And it may not be you solving the problem. It could be facilitating others solving the problem once you start to grow and add admin. But right now it probably is going to be you solving the problem. And so I just want to encourage you. I want you to not be so overwhelmed or not to feel so discouraged, and know that no matter what size your business gets to, you're going to have problems. You're just going to be solving different types of problems. If I do get to 50 employees, right? That's going to be a whole different Serene Clean for that to happen, right? Not whole different. I mean, we got the basics down, but you know what I'm saying? It's going to be a different version of the business. And so I like to think about like, what are the problems that are going to be occurring then that it hasn't even crossed my mind at this size, right? Because when I was starting out, the problems that we are facing now, I never would have been able to really wrap my mind around like how to solve them, or I would have been completely overwhelmed. So I know sometimes you guys probably listen to these episodes and listen to companies that are at a much larger size than yours. And it probably can be overwhelming of like, oh no, like that sounds crazy. Like I can't imagine having to deal with that. But you're thinking about that when it's all on your shoulders. Remember that. And so I say I had like 100 hours of call outs or whatever it was a few weeks ago, and you're like, holy shit, like I couldn't deal with that. How are you dealing with all that stress? Well, I'm not, because I have extra management to help blunt that, right? And I really wasn't stressed at all about it, honestly. So let me tell you that like the problems that you hear maybe me describe or other owners describe, where you can't put where you are now and plop yourself into that and compare. It's not the same, because you're not going to be the same version of yourself when you get to that size, right? Stephanie 6 years ago could not put herself in Stephanie's shoes today, or this summer in particular when it was so stressful, and be able to handle that, right? Because she would have thought, oh, I'm going to have all of this to deal with by myself. But that's not true. I have a great management team. And as you grow, you're going to add managers. You're going to add other people to help solve the problem. That's literally their job as well, is to help solve the problems of the business. So all of that being said, I want you to accept it. I don't want you to get overwhelmed. I want you to start labeling it. And I want you to start doing the thought experiment of what's going to break next, or what's the biggest breaking point of the business if I were to add this, right? And so that might be, if I add one cleaner, if something's going to break when you add one cleaner, well, then we need to solve that, right? We need to work on that. And it might not be solved by the time you add a cleaner, because for you, it might be the thing that's breaking is you need to add a cleaner, and other things are going to break too, right? But and you're going to have to be dealing with multiple things at once. And that's unfortunately the hard pill to swallow, is oftentimes we're dealing with problems in all of the areas, but we're trying to get focused because we can only tackle in this moment one thing, right? We can tackle this thing in front of us. So what is that thing that's going to be in front of us, so that we can either mitigate the problem or eradicate the problem, and then we can work on a new problem. So just a little mindset experiment for you guys this week. I'm going to keep it short because honestly, it's been a week for me too. And there's a lot of problems to be solved as always, but I know that you guys can accomplish anything because look at what you've done so far. I know that you guys have crazy work ethics. I've seen it. I see how hard you're working, but I really want you to think about, how can I put something in place so that this problem is not going to affect me or affect my business so much in the future. And that's putting systems in place, that's putting processes in place, that is perhaps taking things away. Maybe you're doing things that could be automated, right? So there's a lot of things that we can be doing. It just depends on what area of problem we are dealing with. Just remember, every single problem that you've experienced, somebody else has experienced and figured it out. So if they can do it, so can you, right? We've got the internet, guys. We can do anything. I truly feel that. So just take this as a little motivation going into your workday. If you're cleaning right now, it's going to be okay. You are going to solve the problem. Just don't get paralyzed. Put something on paper, get an action plan in place. And that could just be getting your thoughts out on paper of what you're feeling overwhelmed and being like, I need to tackle this before we can go to the next level. And then just tackle it. And it may not be tackling it to perfection, right? Good and done is better than perfect and not done, right? So we just want to get something you can always iterate. Every single area of Serene Clean has been iterated and changed like 10,000 times, right? So don't keep holding yourself to this unattainable expectation of perfection, because that does not exist. We just keep making it better and better and better. There is no such thing as perfect for us. It's getting it very good, getting it to close. Like, we're aiming for the moon and we will land in the stars. But right now you might just need to get above earth, right? Little motivation for you guys. You guys got this. We all have this. We just have to label our problems and tackle them one by one, and then wait for new problems to jump up. So anyways, guys, I hope you're having a great week. Let me know in the comments how your week is going. If you listen to this whole thing, put a little star emoji down below, or cat, whatever. If you want to do a cat, that's cool. I'm a cat lady. And I will see you on the next episode of Filthy Rich Cleaners. Bye, guys.